This podcast is brought to you by the School of Advanced Study, University of London.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here today, thank you. My paper today is on G.M.Hopkins and the Jesuit emblem tradition. And we've already had one wonderful paper by Professor Sargowski on G.M.Hopkins. And in some sense, this paper follows well from that, being a much more specific examination of Hopkins in relation to one aspect of the Jesuit tradition. I will be looking quite closely at the wreck of the Deutschland, and I feel I should apologize for this in some way. As you know, it was the poem that Hopkins wrote to commemorate the death of 5 Franciscan nuns fleeing Germany, but unfortunately it's not one of his most popular poems. And Robert Bridges, who publishes Hopkins' poems in 1918, I think actually writes in a letter to Hopkins' sister of the terrible Deutschland and how he rather wished the nuns had just stayed at home. So I'm sorry for my choice here. But I should probably also say, incidentally, that although I did do my first degree in English literature at a college in India founded by the Jesuits, which is St. Xavier's College in Bombay, I do not have the theological training that many of you here probably have. So with that caveat, I think I can begin. Right. Hopkins joined the Society of Jesus in 1868 and began his studies at St. Mary's Hall at Stonyhurst in 1870. In the Jesuit seminary, Hopkins studied rhetoric, natural sciences, mathematics, and logic before moving on to theology. From 1873 to 74, he taught rhetoric at Roehampton before beginning his training for the priesthood. The Ratio Studiorum of 1599 broadly charts 3 pedagogical cycles. The first cycle of languages and rhetoric, followed by the art cycle and finally theology. The first cycle is seen to be conceived in terms of developing the skills of imagination and memory, and the second, judgment and understanding. Thus equipped, the student begins the study of theology. The study of emblems is situated in the first cycle, where the ratio includes instructions on the production of mnemonic images and emblems as part of the rhetorical invention. As the work of Julie Loach has shown, the teaching of emblematics and other kinds of symbolic imagery within the first cycle is connected with developing the faculties of imagination and memory. It is also connected with the rhetorical function of these emblems in the sense of the part they can play in persuading individuals and moving them to exercise faith. So Hopkins' 1876 ode, The Wreck of the Deutschland, is, according to Hopkins' own prefix, written in the happy memory of 5 Franciscan nuns who drowned aboard a ship while fleeing Germany's anti-Catholic legislation. With its commemorative subject matter, the poem naturally lends itself to an emblematic and symbolic testimony. At the time, of course, Hopkins' ode was notoriously ill-received and rejected for publication in the Jesuit periodical The Month. Writing to Robert Bridges, Hopkins concedes that the poem is obscure and claims that he was, and I quote, not over-desirous that the meaning of all should be quite clear, at least unmistakable. Oddity and obscurity perhaps go hand in hand in one of Hopkins' most demanding compositions, but the poem undoubtedly occupies a rhetorical space, both personal and political. Irritably defending the poem in his letter to Bridges, Hopkins writes, I cannot think of altering anything. Why should I? I do not write for the public. You are my audience, and I hope to convert you. At the same time, the poem's religious rhetoric is also on a political level. Hopkins desires and imagines England's return to the Roman Catholic Church. As he writes in the closing stanza of the poem, our king back, oh, upon English souls. It is Hopkins' hope that the experience of the central nun in the poem will move his English readers. The Wreck of the Deutschland may indeed be read as an effort to convert its readers so that they too can see the reality of the nun's miraculous vision of Christ. So it is in this rhetorical context that Hopkins, I would suggest, draws on the Jesuit emblem tradition. It is somewhat perplexing, then, that these very emblematic tropes and images are concealed beneath the surface of the text. Yet Hopkins' poem envisages and exemplifies a different kind of rhetorical power, and perhaps one more suited to the religious purposes of his poem. For Hopkins himself, in a letter of 1879, describes two kinds of clearness in poetry. Hopkins writes, "One of two kinds of clearness one should have, either the meaning to be felt without effort as fast as one reads, or else, if dark at first reading, when once made out, to explode." And Hopkins italicizes the word explode. Of course, Hopkins' analysis of clearness in poetry calls up the ancient rhetorical concept of énergie, and it is precisely the combination of meditative emblem, spiritual vision, and rhetorical énergie found in emblem writers that I will suggest to be key to a reading of Hopkins' Wreck of the Deutschland. I'll be looking at two 17th century emblem books which combine emblem and meditation. And the first of these is The Devout Heart by the English Jesuit Henry Hawkins. And this is published in 1634 and 1638, and it's a translation of a French work by the French Jesuit Stephen Lustig. And it utilizes the heart-shaped or cardiomorphic emblems and designed by Anton Virkar-Yates. Right, so that's a slide. Right, so these Virkar-Yates emblems typically show a large human heart in which Christ can be seen to be acting in various ways. So here we see Jesus sweeps the dust of sins from the heart, and Jesus knocks at the door of the heart. Now these emblems can be contrasted with the equally popular School of the Heart emblems, which are found in the 1675 and later editions of Francis Waugh's Anglican emblem book, Emblems Divine and Moral, in which a small heart undergoes various physical and mechanical manipulations. This is a bit. The School of the Heart is in fact the work of Christopher Harvey, who in turn is translating an earlier Jesuit work, Benedictus van Haften's Schola Cordis. But throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, these emblems are attributed to Francis Pauls and printed together with Paul's emblems. So Paul's collection, as it appears during this period, effectively derives from two 17th century Jesuit sources, Hermann Hugo's Pia de Sideria and Van Haften's Schola Cordis. Right, so today I'll be referring to the 1866 edition of Paul's emblems, the edition that Hopkins himself was perhaps most likely to see. So here we have the pouring out of the heart, with the accompanying words, which you can hopefully read there: pour out thy heart to God, who'll give thee rest. And we see the two figures, anima, or the soul, who is pouring out her heart, and the angel, or divine love. And Paul's text, like Van Haften's original, is based on the three-part mystical way, and he uses Van Haften's original emblematic narrative of the figures of anima and divine love. So this all stays the same in Paul's edition. In both Henry Hawkins' Devout Heart and in Paul's emblems, the progress of the heart is interpreted spiritually and mystically. Henry Hawkins' book in particular closely follows the structure of Ignatian meditation. So as Paul Holken observes, the picture of the devotional or meditative emblem represents the composition of place, the explanatory poem of the emblem stands for the analysis, and the final epigram for the colloquy. So both Henry Hawkins and Paul's laid a lot of emphasis on the meditative context of these emblems. And in their writing, they continue a Jesuit rhetoric of pictures, a mannered style based on metaphor, and combining spiritual vision and rhetorical energia. To a large extent, this may be explained in terms of the oculi mentis, both the theological and rhetorical concept. So spiritually speaking, it is the eye of the mind which sees God, and rhetorically, it is the eye of the imagination that the writer must engage. So in Aristotle's terms, energia is bringing before the eyes. So in the Wreck of the Deutschland, the word heart actually appears 18 times, and I'm not the first person to count this. As I hope to show, Hopkins' poem, like the 17th century emblem books on which it draws, charts the spiritual journey of the heart in the meditative rhetoric of the Jesuit emblem tradition. So Hopkins' submerged imagery, when once made out, is meant to explode, and in so doing to capture the hearts of his readers in a rhetorical bid to move them to faith. The poem opens with a classic image of the soul imprisoned within the body. Right, this is stanza 1. Feel conscious of time. And thou mastering me, God, giver of breath and bread, world's strand, sway of the sea, Lord of living and dead, thou hast bound bones and veins in me, fastened me flesh, and after it almost unmade, what with dread thy doing. And dost thou touch me afresh, over again I feel thy finger and find thee. Hopkins' opening stanza, I would suggest, may be linked with the emblem you see here. So this is taken from Paul's, but it derives from the spiritual exercises. And as you see, the emblem is a gruesome image of the soul or anima, and that's just the little face there within the skeleton, imprisoned within the ribcage of the skeleton. And the accompanying motto, which is not up there, is taken from Romans 7:24, O wretched man that I am, who shall deliver me from the body of this death? So Hopkins' imagery, I would suggest, is subtly reminiscent of this emblematic image, contrasting the bound or imprisoned body of bones and veins with the fresh and free touch of God's finger. The finger of God is commonly associated with the divine writing in the heart and points to a subtext whose meaning will gradually be made clear. It is the inner tale of the heart which we are to follow. So Quarles' emblem itself draws on Ignatius's conceit for the composition of place. So as St. Ignatius writes, the composition consists in seeing with the eye of imagination the corporeal place where the subject you wish to contemplate is found. If you want to meditate on something invisible, like sin, look with the eye of imagination how your soul is incarcerated in this corrupt body. By delicately echoing the very emblem which exemplifies the Ignatian conceit for the composition of place, Hopkins not only follows this meditative format, but simultaneously frames the poem itself as meditative exercise. So the first stanza of the Rex suggests a locus, the soul or heart fastened in the body and awaiting its release. And like anima, Paul's emblem awaiting deliverance, for Hopkins this renewed touch of God's finger felt afresh suggests a rebirth and renewal. And as we see, the subsequent stanzas continue to chart the heart's progress. So almost immediately in stanza 3, we find that famous emblematic image of the soul's ascent, and that's the winged heart. I rolled out wings that spell and fled with the fling of the heart to the heart of the host. My heart, but you were dove-winged, I can tell, carrier-witted, I am bold to boast. To flash from the flame to the flame then, tower from the grace to the grace. The winged heart is a trope familiar from emblematic tradition, and the emblem you see here is again taken from Quarles. It is the flying of the heart, and I'm not sure how well it can be seen, but there's the heart, the winged heart up there, flying up towards the figure of divine love. And again, the epigram further on, which is not on the slide there, reads in Quarles' text, "Oh, that mine heart had wings like to a dove, that I might quickly hasten hence and move towards the celestial spheres." So what I'm trying to do here in attempting to understand Hopkins' emblematic inheritance is not so much a case of isolating specific references to specific emblems necessarily, but just trying to understand how this emblematic imagery permeates the whole poem, performing the formal and imaginative function of transforming text into meditation. So at the close of part 1 of Hopkins' Rex, stanzas 9 and 10 depict the trying and turning of the heart in its journey to God. Be adored among men, God, three-numbered form, ring thy rebel, dogged in den, father and fonder of heart thou hast wrung, past thy dark descending, and most art merciful then. With an anvil ding, and with fire in him, forge thy will, or rather than stealing a spring through him, melt him, but master him still. Make mercy in all of us, out of all of us mastery, but the adored King. So So the varied imagery of stanza 10, read emblematically, continues that ringing of the heart described in stanza 9. And by anvil, forge, and fire in him, Christ turns the will and heart of man. Or more gently, the influence of God is felt in the soul as a softening and melting. So again, the emblem you see here is taken from Paul's. This is the softening of the heart. And here we see the heart of Anima and the drops there dripping down as the heart melts before the figure of divine love. Another emblem in Paul's title, The Trying of the Heart, describes the heart being tried in a furnace, and elsewhere Paul's describes the hardened heart that is struck with God's hammer. So Hopkins' verses here draw on a number of emblematic tropes and suggest also a kind of emblematic pun or riddle. For Hopkins' plea that God make mercy in us suggests by way of its oddness a kind of substrata of meaning. And this is mercy as from misericordia, benevolence or tenderness of heart. So the making of mercy in man is the forging of the new heart, and this image of the fluid and melting heart is one that will recur in the poem, so it doesn't occur in isolation. Further on in the read, Hopkins also dramatically invokes the 5 wounds of Christ, and this again is consonant with the emblematic lineage on which he is drawing. For devotional emblems promoting the cult of the heart were developed from images of the wound in Christ's side. So this is the stanza here. 5, the finding and sake and cipher of suffering Christ mark the markers of man's make, and the word of it sacrificed. But he scores it in scarlet himself on his own bespoken, before time taken, dearest prized and priced, stigma, signal, cinquefoil token, for lettering of the lamb's fleece, rudding of the rose flake. And beyond its devotional subject, stanza 22 also suggests a familiarity with the theoretical thinking that surrounded the emblem tradition. So Hopkins presents us with a string of synonyms which I've highlighted there: cipher, mark, scores, stigma, signal, token. And again, this is a kind of emblematic riddle. So Hopkins' words, I would suggest, are thrown into relief when read against the writings of the practitioner theorists of emblem books and the distinctions made by these writers between emblemata, impress, devices, hieroglyphs, blazons, and other such terms. So this play on ideas of inscription is also an extension of a powerful biblical metaphor, and that is the divine writing in the heart. And emblem writers frequently play with this conception of the heart book. So the emblem here is again from Paul's, and it is the law table of the heart with the accompanying text, keep thou the law that's written in thy heart. So in stanza 22 we do not see the word heart, but there is the implied image of the heart. This is the word scored in scarlet. It is the ruddy rose flake. And characteristically playful, Hopkins' cinquefoil not only conjures a heraldic sign, but also refers to the rose family, and the flowers of which are seen to have heart-shaped petals. And the closing of the stanza reiterates this image. The word flake is a synonym for emblem or token, and the rose flake then is the emblem of the heart. The reformation of the heart, common in emblem books, also finds echo in stanza 18 of the poem, where Hopkins draws on the classic image, 17th century image of Christ wringing tears of repentance from the hardened heart. So I'm starting to run through this a little bit, sorry. Touched in your bower of bone are you, turned for an exquisite smart have you. Make words break from me here all alone, do you, mother of being in me, heart. Oh, unteachably after evil, but uttering truth, why tears, is it? Tears, such a melting, a madrigal start. Never eldering revel and river of youth, what can it be, this plea, the good you have there of your own? So never eldering in its course, Hopkins' river of youth flows from the bower of the heart. And this is an allusion to John 7:30-80, "He that believes on me, as the scripture has said, out of his heart shall flow rivers of living water." So the emblem you see here is taken from Henry Hawkins' A Devout Heart, and portrays Christ as a fountain in the heart. And Henry Hawkins, in his emblem book, writes, "O miraculous things, behold here from the bottom of the heart an endless spring to arise." So again, here in the rack in stanza 18, we see a number of emblematic tropes: the exquisite smart, the melting of the heart described here by Hopkins, echo the wounding, softening, dissolving of the heart common in emblematic discourse. And we may also note Hopkins' use of the word madrigal, because this song of the heart calls to mind emblems which depict Christ singing and playing musical instruments in the heart. And an example is here in Henry Hawkins' emblem book, and this is Jesus sings in the choir of the heart. Right. I'd like to turn to the central passage of the wreck, the nun's mystical vision of Christ, and embedded here, as I hope to show, is a central sort of meditative, emblematic, and rhetorical trope of the poem, which is the eye of the heart. This is stanza 28. "Strike you the sight of it, look at it loom there, thing that she, there then, the master, Eatser, the only one Christ King head. Ah, there was a heart right, there was single eye, read the unshapable shock night, and knew the who and the why, the Simon Peter of the soul, to the blast Tarpeian fast, but a blown beacon of light, Jesuit, heart's light." This is the vision of Christ which Hopkins' ode brings before its readers, and we experience the heightened rhetorical force of the passage as the reader is directly called upon to see and read with the eyes of faith. Strike you the sight of it, look at it loom there. And what I would like to draw attention to here is Hopkins' deliberate juxtaposition of a heart right with single eye. The reading of Hopkins' right, or we could say devout heart, sees the singular truth of Christ, and the experience is one of illumination, beacon of light, Jesu as heart's light. So against this emphatic portrayal of the illumination of the heart, Hopkins' alignment of the heart and eye in their activity of reading this divine vision cannot but look back to that classic emblematic and rhetorical trope, the eye of the mind or heart. So here we see an emblem taken from Paul's. It is the watching of the heart, and the emblem displays a heart with a wide open eye with the scriptural quote, "I sleep but my heart waketh." And significantly, in Van Haften's original work, this emblem does belong to the way of illumination, which, as we've seen, is very much the subject of this stanza in Hopkins' wreck. So the very final stanza of the Wreck of the Dorschen envisages Hopkins' hoped-for conversion of England, and again we see the emblematic image of the illuminated heart returning powerfully at the poem's close. "Our King back, oh, upon English souls, let him Easter in us be a day-spring to the dimness of us, be a crimson cresseted east. More brightening her rare dear Britain as his reign rolls, pride, rose, prince, hero of us, high priest, our hearts' charities, heart's fire, our thoughts' chivalry's thrones, Lord." It's quite a lot of words there. We previously looked at stanza 10, which goes as part 1 of the poem, and here we saw Hopkins' imagined conversion of an individual, Christ melting and mastering a single human heart. And here at the close of part 2 of the poem, Hopkins envisages a change in the collective heart of the nation. And may Christ Easter in us suggest again the light of Christ rising within human souls, and the image of a crescent continues earlier descriptions of Christ as a beacon of light, heart's light. So this is the final slide. The emblem you see here is taken from Henry Hawkins' book and shows the heart aflame with the love of Christ. And in Hopkins' final stanza, the concluding drum roll of the final 2 lines presents this most emblematic of images, Christ as our heart's charities, heart's fire. So by inscribing his verse with the emblematic imagery of the heart, I would like to suggest that Hopkins, like these emblem writers, makes the rhetorical bid to capture the hearts of his readers and impress his religious vision upon our imaginations and memories. Thank you.